10 years of work were erased in a 5-minute meeting. My boss thought he was brilliant for firing me, but he forgot to check who actually owned the code running his empire. So, I simply let the clock run out and watched it burn. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the office wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind of suffocating quiet that precedes a car crash. I sat across from Russell, a man who had been my boss for a decade, and watched him lean back in his expensive leather chair. He looked comfortable, almost bored, his elbows resting on the armrests like a king holding court in a kingdom I had built for him brick by digital brick. He pressed his fingertips together, forming a steep steeple, and offered me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a smug, practiced expression, the look of a man who had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror to ensure he appeared sufficiently authoritative. "Nate," he began, his voice smooth as glass and just as cold. "We've been reviewing the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, and we've decided to move in a different direction. We're bringing in someone more cost-effective." The words hung in the air between us, suspended in the sterile, air-conditioned chill of the glass-walled office. Cost-effective. It was a sterile euphemism for cheaper. I felt a physical blow to my chest, a sudden hollowness that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with wasted time. My hands, resting on my lap, clenched involuntarily, digging into the fabric of my jeans. I was 41 years old. I had spent the prime of my life, 10 grueling years, building the backbone of Sintel systems. I had skipped my own birthday parties. I had missed family vacations to troubleshoot server crashes at 3 in the morning. I had slept under my desk on a camping mat more times than I had slept in my own bed during the launch years. And this guy, this corporate suit who couldn't write a line of code if his life depended on it, didn't even blink as he discarded me. "Is that it?" I asked, my voice sounding raspy, foreign to my own ears. 10 years, Russell, gone with one line. He shrugged, a microscopic movement of his shoulder that screamed indifference. "It's business, Nate. We need to trim the fat, make room for fresh perspectives." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he didn't see me as a person. To him, I was a line item on a spreadsheet, a cell formatted in red that he wanted to turn black. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. It was a gut check that left me reeling, worse than any physical illness I'd ever endured. I nodded slowly, fighting the urge to flip the heavy oak desk over onto his lap. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like ash, "if that's the decision." "It is," he said, already reaching for a file on his desk, dismissing me before I had even stood up. "HR will have your packet. You'll finish out the next 2 weeks to train your replacement." The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was the realization that loyalty was a currency that had no value in this room. The walk from Russell's office to the elevator bank felt like a funeral procession of one. My legs moved mechanically, carrying me over the plush gray carpet that I had walked across thousands of times before. But now the office felt alien. The familiar hum of servers, the low murmur of sales calls, the clacking of keyboards, it all sounded distorted, like I was hearing it from underwater. I passed the assistant's desk. She looked up, her eyes darting to my face and then quickly away, offering a tight, pitying smile. She knew, everyone probably knew. In a glass cage like this, secrets evaporated faster than spilled water. I didn't acknowledge her. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to keep the white-hot rage in my chest from boiling over and causing a scene. Russell probably thought he had just pulled off the cleanest firing in corporate history. In his mind, he had saved a massive chunk of the budget, trimmed the fat, as he so delicately put it, and made room for some Ivy League golden boy who would work for half my rate. He was probably already mentally spending his end-of-year bonus, congratulating himself on his ruthless efficiency. But as I stepped into the elevator and the metal doors slid shut, sealing me in, a different thought began to take root in the chaos of my mind. It started as a whisper, then grew into a roar that drowned out the panic. "He forgot." Russell didn't know. Nobody in that office knew. They looked at the software keeping his precious company alive, the complex logistics engine that routed thousands of shipments daily, the brain of Sintel systems, and they assumed it belonged to the company. They assumed that. Because I worked there, everything I touched was theirs. But it wasn't. I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool metal of the elevator door as the floor numbers blinked past like a countdown. 10:98. I had written the original logistics engine on my own time in my cramped apartment in Hoboken 3 full years before Sintel even existed. It was my baby, my creation. When I signed on as their first real engineer, I had been careful. I let them license it, quietly, legally. It was a separate agreement buried deep in the onboarding paperwork that Russell had likely never read. I remembered the PDF stored on my private cloud drive. Page after page of dried legal text, clauses, ownership statements, and license terms. I had texted Sheila, my old friend and a ruthless patent lawyer, just before walking into the meeting. The memory of her advice from a decade ago echoed in my head. Companies act loyal until the budget tightens. Own your code, Nate, always. The elevator dinged at the lobby, pulling me out of my trance. I stepped out into the wind. It was early November, cold and sharp, biting through my thin jacket. I didn't button it up. I didn't even feel the cold. I just walked, horns blaring behind me as I crossed the street without looking. They thought they were just cutting an expensive employee. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Without the key, the engine doesn't run. And I was the only one holding the key. The next morning, I didn't storm in. I didn't call in sick. I walked into the office at 9:00 a.m. sharp, carrying a travel mug of coffee and wearing my usual hoodie. If they wanted a transition, I would give them a transition. I needed to be the picture of compliance. I sat at my desk, the same desk where I had spent nights debugging critical errors while Russell was out playing golf with clients. I looked around the open plan office. I saw the server racks in the glass room behind me, machines I had configured by hand. I saw the junior developers, good kids, stressing over tickets I could solve in seconds. I had sacrificed relationships for this place. I had let my health slide. I had poured my soul into the logic that made Sintel millions. And there he was. Dustin. He was waiting by my desk, leaning against the partition with the casual arrogance of someone who has never had to fight for anything. He looked to be in his early 30s, clean-cut, wearing a navy blazer that looked too expensive for a Tuesday. His hair was gelled perfectly, his hands were soft, unmarked by the stress of hardware installs or keyboard fatigue, and he had management track written all over him. Hey, Nate, right? Dustin pushed off the wall and extended a hand. I've heard a ton about you. Big shoes to fill, huh? I stood up slowly and took his hand. It was a weak grip. Yeah, I said, keeping my face completely neutral. Let's get started. From his glass-walled corner office, Russell was watching us. He stood with his hands on his hips, looking like a proud father at a spelling bee. He was practically glowing with self-satisfaction. He had replaced the expensive, aging engineer with the shiny, cheaper new model. He probably thought the software was just a static tool, something you bought once and used forever like a stapler. He had no idea that the Sintel logistics core wasn't just a program. It was a living, breathing ecosystem that required constant authentication. Authentication that was tied to a license. My license. So, Dustin said, pulling up a chair and clicking a pristine silver pen. Russell said the system is pretty automated. I just need to know the basic admin overrides and where the documentation is stored. I sat down and logged in. Documentation? I asked, tapping the side of my temple. It's all in here, Dustin. We never had time to write it down. We were too busy growing. Dustin blinked, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm a quick study. Good, I said, opening the backend dashboard. Because the architecture is custom, built from scratch. I spent the next 2 weeks teaching him exactly what he asked for and absolutely nothing more. I showed him the buttons. I showed him the user accounts. I showed him how to reset a password, but I didn't show him the heart of the machine. I didn't show him the renewal protocols. Russell walked by a few times, clapping Dustin on the shoulder, ignoring me entirely. He was already treating me like a ghost. He scrutinized the department's output, making loud comments about efficiency and modernization, casting pointed looks in my direction. He was enjoying this. He loved the power trip of discarding the old guard. What Russell didn't know was that the license renewal date was tied to my employment status. The moment I was officially terminated in the HR system, a 30-day countdown would begin silently in the background code. He thought he was saving the company. In reality, he was lighting a fuse on a bomb that was buried deep in the foundation, and he had just handed me the detonator. Day 14 arrived with the finality of a guillotine blade. The 2 weeks of knowledge transfer had been a farce. Dustin had spent most of the time trying to memorize acronyms he didn't understand, nodding enthusiastically while his eyes glazed over. He was drowning, and he didn't even know he was underwater yet. I packed my personal belongings into a single cardboard box, a chipped mug, 2 Moleskine notebooks filled with architectural diagrams, and a framed photo of my dog. That was it. 10 years of life reduced to 12 inches of cardboard. Dustin hovered nearby, tapping nervously on his tablet. So, Nate, if the server load spikes during the Black Friday rush, the autoscaler handles that, right? I paused, holding the box. The autoscaler is tied to the core license, Dustin. As long as the license is valid, it scales. Right, cool, valid, got it. He typed something into his tablet, likely make sure license is valid, without asking what that actually meant. I walked past Russell's office one last time. He was on the phone, laughing loudly, feet up on his desk. He caught my eye through the glass. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just turned his chair slightly so his back was to me. It was the ultimate dismissal. He was already spending the money he saved by cutting my salary. The elevator ride down felt different this time. It didn't feel like sinking, it felt like launching. I stepped out into the lobby, handed my badge to the security guard, who looked more upset to see me go than my own boss did, and walked out. I went straight home to my apartment in Hoboken. It was quiet. The kind of quiet I hadn't experienced in a decade of being on call 24/7. I didn't wallow. I didn't drink. I set the box down on the kitchen table and opened my personal laptop, not the company machine, but my own rig. I navigated to the secure portal Sheila and I had set up years ago. It was a simple interface, black background, green text. Licensing Authority, N. Collins. I clicked on Active Contracts. There was only one, Sintel Systems Logistics Core, status, active, expiration, triggered upon termination of licensor employment. I didn't have to hack anything, I didn't have to plant a virus, I just had to confirm the reality of the situation. I clicked the button that said Update Employment Status. A prompt appeared, Confirm Termination. I thought about the missed birthdays, I thought about Russell's smug smile, I thought about Dustin's clueless nodding. I clicked Yes. The status changed instantly, license revoked, grace period 12 hours. They had 12 hours. I closed the laptop, ordered a pizza, and slept for 10 hours straight. It was the best sleep of my life. The next morning, the sun hit my face at 7:00 a.m., but I didn't get up immediately. I laid there listening to the city wake up, knowing that across the river, chaos was blooming. At 8:30 a.m. on the dot, my personal cell phone buzzed on the nightstand. I let it buzz. Then it buzzed again and again. A text message from Kyle, one of the junior devs I had mentored. System failure at Sintel, can you come in? I picked up the phone, read the preview, and set it back down. I went to the kitchen and started brewing coffee. The aroma of dark roast filled the apartment, a stark contrast to the panic I knew was unfolding in the server room at Sintel. 5 minutes later, another text from Kyle, everything's freezing. Backend won't authenticate. Error code 401, unauthorized. Then a third, Dustin is freaking out. He tried to deploy a patch and it crashed the portal. Please call me. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I wasn't being malicious, I was being a stickler for the rules. I wasn't an employee, I had no authorization to touch their systems. At 9:15 a.m. my phone rang. It wasn't a text this time, it was the office landline. I recognized the number. I let it ring twice, then answered, putting it on speaker as I leaned back against the counter. Hello? Nate, the voice was shaking. It was Lauren from operations. She was a good person, always stressed, always trying to keep the trains running on time. Nate, thank God, it's Lauren. Everything is down. Nothing is working. The driver tablets, the warehouse scanners, the client portals, they all just stopped. Stopped how, Lauren? I asked, my voice calm. Lev. There's a red banner, she stammered. It says license expired, contact administrator. We can't process orders. We have trucks sitting at the docks unable to move. We can't even log in to see the inventory. I closed my eyes for a second. Yeah, I said softly, that sounds right. There was a silence on the other end, thick and confused. What do you mean that sounds right? Can you remote in? Can you fix it? I'm not employed there anymore, Lauren, I said. I don't have access. And Sintel doesn't have license to run that software without me. What but, Russell said. You need to talk to leadership, I interrupted gently. I can't help you. I hung up. By 10:00 a.m., the meltdown was absolute. My phone was lighting up in waves, calls, emails, LinkedIn messages. But the one I was waiting for came at 10:15 a.m. Russell. I watched the name flash on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately and again. On the fourth try, I picked up. Nate, Russell didn't even say hello. He sounded breathless like he had been running. Listen, we have a situation, a glitch. The system is locking us out. It's not a glitch, Russell, I said, walking over to the window to look out at the skyline. Read the error message. I don't care about the error message, he snapped, his old arrogance flaring up through the panic. I care that we are losing $10,000 a minute. Fix it. Get down here now. I don't work for you, I reminded him. You fired me, remember, cost-effective measures. Nate, don't play games with me, his voice cracked, shifting from command to begging. We'll pay you consultant rates, whatever, just turn it back on. It's not a switch, Russell, it's a contract. You canceled the contract when you fired the licensor. You're running pirated software now. Silence, long, heavy silence. What do you want? He whispered. I want you to stop calling me, I said. I'm busy. I ended the call and turned off my phones. I spent the afternoon watching the world catch up to what I already knew. It started on Twitter. Truck drivers were tweeting photos of long lines at Sintel distribution centers. Clients were posting screenshots of the license-expired banner. By 1:00 p.m., the industry news sites had picked it up. Logistics giant Sintel Systems paralyzed by massive IT failure. I sat on my couch, laptop open, watching the stock ticker. Sintel was public midcap. The graph looked like a cliff dive. It was down 12% by lunch. Russell was trying to regain control. I saw a leaked internal memo on a tech forum where he claimed it was a cyber attack and that they were containing the threat. He was lying. He was trying to buy time, praying he could bully me into submission before the truth came out. But he had forgotten about the paper trail. I drafted a simple email to my lawyer, copying the board of directors' public contact email, info I had saved years ago. I didn't write a manifesto. I just attached the original 2014 licensing agreement, the 2023 renewal signed by Russell, and the termination clause highlighted in yellow. Subject: Notice of IP infringement. Body: Please be advised that Sintel Systems is currently operating proprietary software without a valid license. Continued use constitutes theft. Cease and desist immediately. I hit send. An hour later, the news shifted. The cyberattack narrative fell apart. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal tweeted, "Sources close to Sintel suggest the outage is due to an intellectual property dispute with the former chief architect, recently fired." The internet did the rest. People found my LinkedIn profile. They saw the tenure, 10 years, 4 months. They saw the end date, yesterday. The narrative flipped instantly. I wasn't the villain holding the system hostage. I was the creator who had been wronged. Russell called me again at 4:00 p.m. I had turned my phone back on to order dinner. This time I answered. "You sent the contract to the board," he hissed. He sounded wrecked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Judith is threatening to convene an emergency session." "I'm just protecting my asset, Russell," I said, opening a bottle of water. "You're the one who told the press it was a cyber attack. That's securities fraud, isn't it? Lying to shareholders about the nature of a disaster." "We can work this out," he pleaded. "Nate, please come back. We'll give you your job back, raise, bonus, anything." "I don't want the job," I said. "And I don't want to work with you. You wanted to trim the fat, you did, now you have to live with the skeleton." "Dustin can't fix this," he shouted, losing it. "He's useless, he doesn't know the code." "I know," I said coldly. "That's why you paid me the salary you thought was too high. You weren't paying for my time, Russell, you were paying for the keys." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. "I'm going to sue you," he threatened weakly. "I'll bury you." "Go ahead," I said. "My lawyer is Sheila. She wrote the contract you signed. Good luck." I hung up again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room. I felt lighter than I had in years. But I knew this wasn't over. Russell was cornered, and cornered animals bite. He would try one last desperate move to save his skin, and I needed to be ready to end it publicly. The next morning, Sintel Systems didn't just have a technical problem, they had a public execution on their hands. E-stock had opened down another 18%. Clients were fleeing. The cyberattack lie had imploded the moment the WSJ article went live with the details of the licensing dispute. I received an email at 8:00 a.m. from Judith, the chair of the board. It wasn't threatening, it was an invitation. "Mr. Collins, the board of directors is convening an emergency meeting at 11:00 a.m. We request your presence to discuss a resolution. We are prepared to meet your terms." I didn't reply immediately. I showered, shaved, and put on a suit, not the hoodie I wore to write code, but the suit I wore when I meant business. I walked into the Sintel building at 10:55 a.m. The lobby was chaotic, journalists were camped outside, employees were huddled in corners whispering. When I walked in, the security guard, the same one who looked sad to see me go, nodded respectfully and buzzed me through without asking for ID. I took the elevator up to the top floor to the boardroom. The doors opened and the air was freezing. Russell was there, sitting at the far end of the long mahogany table. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His tie was loose, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was staring at his hands. Judith sat at the head of the table. She was a steel-spined woman in her 60s who didn't tolerate incompetence. Beside her sat the company's general counsel, looking pale. "Mr. Collins," Judith said, standing up, "thank you for coming." I didn't sit down. I stood at the end of the table, placing my briefcase on the polished wood. "Let's keep this short," I said. My voice echoed in the silent room. "You are operating my software illegally. Every minute your servers are on, you are accruing damages." "We understand," Judith said calmly. "Russell has explained the oversight." "It wasn't an oversight," I corrected her, looking directly at Russell. He flinched. "It was a decision, a calculated risk to cut costs by firing the architect. He gambled the company's existence on the belief that I wouldn't fight back, or worse, that I didn't own what I created." "We are prepared to offer you a reinstatement," the general counsel cut in nervously. "Full benefits, a significant salary increase, stock options." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I don't want to work here, not anymore." "Then what do you want?" Russell snapped, his voice hoarse. "Name your price, Nate. We need the system back up." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who had nothing left but desperation. "I want a public retraction," I said. "I want a statement released within the hour admitting that the outage was caused by management's failure to renew a license, not a cyberattack. I want my name cleared of any negligence." "We can do that," Judith said instantly. And I continued, "I want to sell you the software permanently, no more license. You buy the code, you own it." Russell looked hopeful. "Fine, how much?" I named a number. It was high, 7 figures, enough to retire or enough to start something new. And I added, "I want Russell's resignation effective immediately." The room went dead silent. Russell's head snapped up. "You can't do that." "I don't have to," I said. "The board does, because if they don't, I walk out that door and the license stays revoked. You can rebuild your entire logistics platform from scratch. It'll take 6 months. You'll be bankrupt in 3. I turned to Judith. "The software and his resignation, that's the price of turning the lights back on." Judith didn't even look at Russell. She looked at me, then down at the papers in front of her. She picked up a pen. "Done," she said. Russell was escorted out of the building 10 minutes later. He didn't scream or shout. He just walked out, carrying the same cardboard box I had carried 2 days prior. The difference was I walked out with my head high, he walked out looking at his shoes. I sat down with the legal team and signed the transfer of ownership. The money was wired to my account before the ink was dry. I logged into the admin portal one last time, inputted the new permanent license key, and hit enter. Within seconds, the monitors on the wall lit up green, the red banners vanished. The hum of the servers seemed to deepen, settling back into their rhythm. Sintel was back online. I walked out of the building into the afternoon sun. The reporters were still there, shouting questions, but I ignored them. I hailed a cab and went to meet Sheila for a drink. We sat in a quiet booth at a bar in downtown Hoboken. She raised her glass of scotch. "To owning your code," she said with a grin. "To reading the fine print," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. The fallout was swift. The press release went out that evening. Sintel admitted to the licensing error and announced a leadership change. The stock stabilized, though it would take years to recover the trust they lost. Russell became a pariah in the industry, the man who almost tanked logistics giant to save a few bucks. As for me, I didn't retire. I took the money and started my own firm. Small, lean, no glass-walled offices, no arrogant directors, just good engineers building good tools. I hired the best people I knew, including a few of the smart junior devs from Sintel who quit the moment their non-competes expired. We built software the right way. And every contract I wrote, every line of code I shipped, I made sure of one thing: I knew exactly who held the keys. They thought I was just a cost. They forgot I was the architect. And in the end, the house always belongs to the builder.